Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
Good morning and welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Marlene Cuellar.
And I'm Gavin Courtney.
And thank you for joining us this morning.
It's a beautiful Thursday morning. Nice and sunny already.
Yes.
Yep, we are going to get into our weather a little bit later, but of course there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on as usual. And yesterday on our show, we were joined by the Minister of Home Affairs, Honorable Karim Musa.
Yes.
And we discussed a lot about the crime situation and specifically, so what are some of the plans that the government plans to put in place to help curb some of the recent violence. And so one of the interesting things that I found, and this was something that he said on the show yesterday, is that they were that the government was looking to ban face coverings which cover the majority of your face, and those include those, the popular
fisherman masks.
Fisherman masks, the rash guards, I think they call them that too. And then but there's other ones like balaclavas and stuff that kind of like cover your entire face or only your eyes and stuff. So it's so they're looking in so that it's seems to be the case that the government is looking to ban those in public spaces.
Yeah, he said the new SI would do that. It's interesting because we saw where a bus company had actually already instituted, I think it was Westline Bus, saying that they wouldn't accept or stop for people who are wearing the fisherman mask. Basically covers all of this. So really all you see are your eyes, and if you're wearing a hat, you barely see anything. And we've heard repeatedly, I know the commissioner had said it before, that they wouldn't allow for those types of masks, but it seems that it will now be implemented in the new SI that is meant to come out. October 1st, we are supposed to see a change in the regulations, and that should be included. But of course, we've not seen the regulations as yet, so we can't we can't tell you all the details about it. But Minister Musa did say that yesterday. And he used, I think, the example of trying to find perpetrators, like the one who committed the shooting on Dwayne Gabriel, who executed or murdered Dwayne Gabriel, where even if you can get a video of the person who committed the crime, it's very difficult to see any facial features because of this covering. Imagine your ears are covered, with your masks, you get a little, the regular mask, you get a little sense of who's behind it. We're getting better at spotting people with masks on. But that is one of the developments that we are expecting. But I mean, I got to say something interesting here, because I know early in the pandemic, we did a few interviews, stories and interviews with health professionals who'd actually said from back then that the rash guards or the fisherman masks are ineffective in preventing the spread of COVID, because they actually make the particles coming out of your mouth and nose even smaller and kind of hang around in the air longer. So beyond the criminal element of it or the concerns about crime, it also does very little for health protection.
Yes, and I was absolutely thinking about that same thing, because I was, when I heard the announcement yesterday, I was thinking to myself that, my first thought was that, okay, maybe people are going to complain or whatever. And I was thinking, to myself that, in relation to the COVID-19 regulations and the SIs that we've been, that have been coming out, the goal at the end of the day is to, prevent the spread of COVID, right? And so even though this is sort of an ancillary issue and it's helping to solve a problem with crime, it also achieves the objective of the COVID-19 regulations because, as you said just now, those masks have not been recommended from the very beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I remember that very clearly, and so it's. I think that you know, on both sides, you could look at it as a benefit.
Yeah, I think if I recall the details of that study, it was actually saying no mask is more effective than the fisherman mask. So that was interesting. I know I'd already heard some comments about you know what people that people are upset about it. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to define what type of masks people should be using, but for preventing COVID transmission purposes, the advice has always been medical masks, or if you're going to use cloth, that it's multiple layers.
Exactly, and I was thinking about that same thing. I don't know if you've ever worn one of those fisherman things, because I have.
I have,
and
yeah.
When you wear
but
them,
for sea, like when I don't want to get burned.
But it's one thin layer,
Yeah.
and you more or less feel, and because it's how close it fits to your face, you do. It's like just like you said, it's like a filter rather than a mask. You know, just breathing through that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, the visuals I'm getting of spit right now, not so great for early morning. But that is one of the developments. But I think the larger issue here is really considering the fact that we do know that it has to be today, I'd imagine, that we will see what these new regulations will entail, as the start date would be October 1st. And that includes the changes in the vaccination regulations. We were also joined by the Attorney General on Tuesday, who shed some light on the process that went into putting together these regulations. And yesterday we saw the Public Service Union coming out expressing their concern that they were not consulted. Yes,
absolutely. And if you were watching on Tuesday, you might remember that the Honorable Attorney General did make the announcement that there was going to be a scaling back of what was initially proposed as to require vaccination or proof of vaccination, at least of the first shot, to enter, or for those which require 2 shots, to enter any public space. But it's now been scaled back a little bit, and it's only going to apply to publicly owned property, meaning property that's owned by the government, and that includes government offices, all government offices, and other agencies.
Yeah. And statutory bodies.
Yes, and those owned by statutory bodies or entities that are majority controlled by the government.
Yeah.
And that is going to come into effect as of tomorrow. And of course, there has been concern with that. Even though it's going a bit, it's not going as far as what was initially proposed. But of course, because those are services which people do have to access, there is still a concern. But I think that you know, the latest vaccination figures that have been coming out have been encouraging to me.
Yeah.
Every time I see every time I see the younger section, and it's usually over like 20,000 every day, I get super encouraged by those numbers growing, and I think that, you know, we're well over 100,000, well, of 100,000 people who've been fully vaccinated so far.
And over 100,000 with the first dose.
Yep.
So we're inching closer. When it comes to children, though, while those numbers are promising, it does seem, and we've heard reports from individual schools where they've already made the decision. Remember, school was supposed to return to face-to-face classes with COVID protocols in place starting October 5th, which is this Monday. And I know so many parents who have just been anxiously awaiting this date because, you know, it's been tough parenting and being able to keep up with the children with schoolwork. And that's for the parents who have the time, the energy, or even the knowledge to help the children with school. There's so many other children out there who don't have that type of assistance. So the October 5th date was first presented by the Ministry of Education. However, some schools have already informed parents that that's not going to happen. It's going to be pushed back a few weeks due to this current wave. And the Ministry of Education should be putting out the latest advice on their end as to what can take place starting October 5th. Again, we're short on the deadline. There's today and tomorrow to be able to prepare people for what's going to take place on Monday.
Yes, and I mean, it sort of follows the pattern that generally all things related to COVID have been. Where you know, people planning just in general is very hard. even though we have been going through this surge for the last couple of weeks, I think that whenever there is a strain on the healthcare system, as we're experiencing right now, you know, important decisions have to be made, and especially, you know, when it comes to a decision like when and how to open back schools, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. And as we know right now, we're seeing hospitalizations. Well, the hospitals are almost at capacity, and we're still seeing deaths reported pretty much daily from COVID-19. So the measures that we have to adopt, we have to monitor the situation, and that's why there's maybe all these short notice changes. We have to work with the situation that is in front of us.
Yeah, yeah. So those are some of the stories that have been popping up in the news of recent, and of course we'll have more follow-up, especially on the education situation and looking at the COVID numbers. Yes, the day before yesterday was 350. Yesterday it was a little less than 300. You know, there is kind of a epidemiology curve that has been discussed, which is you're going to hit your peak and then it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to come down. So we're definitely not out of the woods as yet. And the question is, what happens now that the stricter regulations come to an end, the 2-week period at the end of this, or well, actually I should say at next week, the start of next week. So we just keep on encouraging you, you know, if you're not vaccinated, do talk to your medical professional to get the accurate information to make that decision. Even if you are vaccinated, and especially if you're unvaccinated, make sure that you're taking every precaution that you can. Delta has proven to be exactly what we were warned, highly transmissible. So you don't even realize when you come into contact with it, and there is a community spread in the country, so it can be any person that you interact with that may be passing on COVID to you. So you have to protect yourself and protect your loved ones.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, as I said before, it is an important step, because it's not, the other thing is that you all, a lot of people have been, when it comes to the issue of vaccination, you know, it has been related, or it's been discussed, sorry, in the context of being sort of just, you know, one sort of choice that will affect you. But it does affect others, because the vaccination also makes you less likely to contract. It doesn't, of course, completely protect you from getting it, but it makes you less likely to contract it. And if you're less likely to contract it, you're also less likely to spread it. So you think if you are a person who has to, you know, access public spaces, which we all do, we have to go buy food. At the end of the day, we have to buy things, you know, we have to provide for ourselves and our families. Yeah. Chances are you're going to come into contact with the virus at the rate of the transmission. So if you want to lower your chances of getting it, you also decrease the chance of spreading it. And if it's spread, then there's going to be less, you know, people affected, less families affected, people getting seriously ill or dying. So all those factors should weigh into your decision. And of course, as Marlene said, try to get the facts from the best possible sources.
All right, and so we got to get moving into our show for today. It's time for us to shift focus and get you some positive messages to get you through this day. And that means it's time for Eye Opener. Or Eye Opener, taken from dailyom.com, goes like this. We can improve our physical and well-being by first starting to notice our thoughts and our reactions to them. The power of the mind is a curious thing, because it is so powerful, yet so difficult to control sometimes. We find ourselves thinking a certain way, knowing that this thought may be creating trouble for us, yet we find it difficult to stop. For example, many people have the experience of getting sick at the same time every year or every time they go on a plane. They may even be aware that their beliefs impact their experiences. So continuing to think that they will get sick, and then they do. We have the power to create physical health and mental health simply by paying attention to the tapes running in our minds. Once we hear ourselves, we have the option to let that tape keep running or to make a new recording. We harness the power of the mind in our defense when we choose supportive, healing words that foster good health and high spirits. All we need to do is to remember to tend the field in our mind with the attentive and loving hand of a master gardener, tending her flower beds, culling out the weeds so that the blossoms may come to fruition.
That's a nice eye-opener. And I think it's absolutely true that your mental state definitely influences your physical state. And it definitely also applies when you're ill. And it's kind of funny because when, as we were reading the eye-opener, you know what I was thinking about? Have you ever heard that joke about how men and women experience the flu differently? And
Yeah, lived it.
Yeah, and how they say that women, they always push through and, they try to do it, whereas men are like, if they're the slightest
That's a fact,
thing.
Gavin.
Yeah.
Let's not even pretend. That's a fact.
Yeah, and so that's what I was thinking, and I'm thinking obviously that has to do with mentality, because if we have the same flu, you should be able to have the same,
Well, thank you
reaction.
for being the spokesperson to declare that.
Exactly, you guys should be laying down on the bed, and I don't know.
No, I was voting for the opposite, that you pushed through as well.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, actually, who flashed into my mind was Dr. Cuellar. When he was hospitalized with COVID, one of the things he kept on saying over and over is that he had to keep mentally strong and stay positive through it, because that was important to start feeling better. And, anytime you checked in with him, he was always optimistic and upbeat, even though it is concerning to be hospitalized with COVID-19. And so I think that was immediately what came to mind, because it is a very concerning time. We know that there are dangers with the disease, and you have to keep that positive outlook. It doesn't mean that's going to be all that solves you, and that's the key part, but it does help.
No, it absolutely is true. And, scientists and doctors have been studying, what they call the placebo effect for many decades.
True.
And it's true that, and that it just goes to show how powerful, your mentality is when it comes to, addressing issues when it comes to your physical health. So, in some cases, it really can be mind over matter. And in others, your mental state will just give you that push, that you need. And it can apply to not only being physically sick, it can also apply to exercising, because you need that mental just in order to get up and go to the gym or go exercise, that involves a lot of mental, that involves a workout on its own. Think about it, mind over matter.
All right, so that is the eye-opener for this morning. And it's time for us to take a look at our weather for today, exactly what you can expect. And we have the forecast prepared by forecaster Catherine Cumberbatch. And she's going to tell us about what we can... Oh, here she is. She's on the line with us. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning, Marlene. Good morning. How are you, my dear?
I am great. So I forecast that today is going to be hot.
Yes, fair weather will prevail. Fair and warm weather will prevail today.
All right.
So for the next 24 hours, Marlene, we could expect sunny skies, high temperatures reaching 89 along the coast, 94 inland, and 84 in the mountains. Tonight, partly cloudy again, and low temperatures dropping to 80 along the coast, 74 inland, and 66 in the hills. Showers or thunderstorms, if any, will be isolated. The winds will be coming out of the east at 5 to 15 knots, and for the seas will be slight. Beautiful time to go to the Keys. And the outlook for Friday and Friday night is for similar weather conditions to prevail.
Okay.
In the tropical weather outlook, aside from Hurricane Storm and Tropical Storm Victor over the North Atlantic, there are no other areas that could develop into tropical cyclone during the next 48 hours. And that's about it that we have for you guys.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update. You have a great day.
You too, and stay safe.
All right. Bye. There you have it.
Yep, so as I predicted earlier in the show, it is going to be hot today.
All right.
Yep. But we do have to get moving into our show, and we've got a lot of great conversations lined up for this morning. And we are going to be continuing the topic, speaking about healthcare in our first segment, but in kind of with a different view. We are actually going to be joined by the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of the Carl Huschner Memorial Hospital, Chandra Nisbet Cancino. We're going to get an update from her and get an idea of her vision for the hospital moving forward. And that's going to be our first segment for this morning.
All right, and the second part of our show, you know, when we tuned into the Prime Minister's address at the UN last week, one of the key factors that he made a point of discussing was climate change, and that has been a continuous theme from all world leaders. We are across the world. World leaders and technical experts are preparing for the conference on climate change. And so we're going to get a check-in with the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center in Belize, Dr. Colin Young, to find out about the preparations happening here and what are the expectations at that conference.
And for our final segment, we're going to be shifting gears and we are going to be talking about some food. So specifically vegan food. We're going to be joined by Ras Ruben, who is the owner of Vegan Bites, and we're going to be getting some healthy recipes and showing you how to prepare some healthy vegan food at home. So that's going to be our final conversation for this morning.
All right, we're going to take that break, but before we do, we got a birthday shout out, and we are saying happy birthday to
Yvette Bermudez. So from all of us here at Open Your Eyes on Channel 5, we want to wish you a very, very happy birthday, Yvette, and many more. We hope you enjoyed today.
All right. So we'll take that break and we will be back in a few with the newly appointed CEO of the KHMH, Chandra Nisbet Cancino. So please stay tuned.
Good morning, sweetie. It's time for school.
Are you a teacher or public sector employee who is thinking of owning your new home? Get the keys to your new home with Belize Bank's all-inclusive mortgage, the best financing option in Belize for your new home purchase or construction. Inclusive of all mortgage-related fees, no down payment, affordable terms, amazingly low interest rates. Visit our nearest branch to speak to one of our financial advisors to discuss how you can be one step closer to owning your new home. Some conditions apply.
We have been a partner with Smart for over 10 plus years. We have a full Smart plan we use as our major driver for our business. We have a service that rolls over in that if you call one and it is busy, it rolls over to the next line. So once you call us, you can get us at any time. Before we got this Smart service, we were paying upwards of nearly $2,000 in phone bills. Since we've had our Smart service, we pay an average about $600. So we've had tremendous saving, more than 50%. For the businesses, if you want to save money, switch to Smart because it is far more cost effective and the service is excellent.
Smart continues to be innovative in bringing new technology and meaningful savings during these challenging times to businesses across Belize. Sign up for our VoIP technology or broadband packages and save more.
How does the AstraZeneca vaccine work? The vaccine provides support to help your body develop immunity to the virus that causes COVID-19. The body is left with a supply of memory cells that will remember how to fight the virus. It takes a few weeks for the body to produce the antibodies after vaccination. How long does it take to build immunity after taking the first dose of the vaccine? There is protection 14 days after a person's first dose. However, that initial protection may decline over time, which is the reason why it is so important to get the second shot. How long after the first dose should one take the second dose? The second dose should be given between week 8 and week 12. Are there any deaths associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine? There have been no deaths associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Vaccines save lives. They remain the safest, most effective, and cost-effective medical tool developed. Increased uptake of the vaccine is the best way to stop this pandemic, save lives, and return to normalcy.
The maritime industry is the main connector for global trade. Even in a worldwide pandemic, shipping has continued to transport more than 80% of world trade, including vital medical supplies, food, and other essential goods critical for the COVID-19 response. World Maritime Day provides the opportunity to highlight shipping and other maritime activities in Belize and across the globe. The Belize Port Authority, IMARBE, and Belize Coast Guard invite you to join them for the virtual celebration of World Maritime Day under the theme Seafarers at the Core of Shipping's Future. Join the event on Channel 5, Facebook, or YouTube on Thursday, September 30th at 10 a.m.
My name is Alfred Ayuso, and I lost my dad to COVID. Fred Ayuso, wow, there's just so much to say about him. You know, he was like a real caretaker and a real provider for his family. You know, he was an extremely loving man. He had very colorful vocabulary, you know, if you know what I mean. I remember getting the call in early June that my dad had COVID. And, you know, at first I didn't think much of it. I didn't feel like it was life-threatening at the time. Ever since I got the call, like every single day, things just got worse. We couldn't do anything except just be hopeful and to pray. I could remember the day that he got intubated. He was on a video call with my little sister, and she recorded it and sent us the video. And it was the last clip I saw of him alive. And you know, I was looking at him, and he was struggling to breathe. And he was just saying that I'm tired. You know, he's saying I can't breathe. I'm tired. And I could see him struggling, and at that point, I could see that all he wanted was to rest, because he's been fighting this virus for days without sleep, just trying to breathe, just trying to stay alive. He fought for his life, and you know, he was 59 when he got intubated, and his birthday was on the 11th of June, and he managed to hang on until his birthday, and he completed 60 years under that machine, and he was alive, and he died the following day. He wanted to get vaccinated, but it's just one of those things. I guess he didn't got around to it, and you know, listening to all the misconception, you know, I guess it makes you kind of step back a little or hold back, and that's the problem. I guess that's the thing with the virus. It doesn't wait for anyone. You know, losing someone to COVID definitely feels like you're cheated. Losing someone to COVID is really losing someone that is not their time. Don't wait until COVID hits home for you to see that it's real, and to see that we have an obligation and a responsibility to protect ourselves, to protect our family, our brothers and sisters.
Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
And we're back. And if you're joining us right now, we are just getting our first conversation for this morning started. And as we said before the break, we are joined by the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of the Carl Huchner Memorial Hospital, Chandra Nisbet Cancino. Good morning.
Good morning, Gavin. Good morning, Marlene, and good morning, Belize.
And congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you very much.
Has it sunken in yet? How are you feeling right at this moment?
Every day, having to pass Carl Huchner to get here. It sank in a little bit more every day. It sinks in a little bit more every day. I don't assume the position until October the 15th. But it feels like I have started already.
Yeah. And this is your introductory interview before you get your full investigation as to what's happening on the inside.
Yes.
But let me step back for a moment. You are well known in the country. You have been a political aspirant. You are outspoken social media activist, and of course professionally well known with your past roles. What prompted you to make the decision to even apply for this post?
Well, for me, Marlene, it has always been about service to my country. Even my little stint with politics, it was always because I wanted to serve the country. That didn't work out, and everything for a good reason. And so when I saw the opportunity, and then my passion is healthcare and healthcare provision and saving lives and all of that, simply because of my profession as a nurse. And so when I saw the opportunity at Carl Huebschner, I decided, well, perhaps this is the opportunity that I may have been waiting for. So I submitted my application, and here I am today.
And the news was announced just a week ago, less than a week ago, and you have started to talk about what you are hoping to do when you go in. But just at the point of application and even through your interview process, there are conversations about goals and meeting the expectations and working along with the board. For you, in applying for this post, what did you want to do at the KHMH?
Well, the vacancy ad came out, I don't remember exactly the date. And then I saw the chairman doing some rounds on the media. And I listened very carefully to him. He's the chairman, he represents the board vision. And when I realized what he was saying and what his vision for Carl Huebschner was, then I realized that it aligned for what mine would have been as well. And so that is essentially what prompted me to submit my application for the position. And it's simply because Carl Huebschner is 26 years old. And so it's at an age where, you're supposed to be going into adulthood, getting on your feet. It's time to reassess where you are in life, and I think that is exactly where Carl Huebschner is at this point. It's a time to look at where Carl Huebschner is 26 years ago. It was developed for certain service provision, and now that has expanded significantly, but the structure has not grown. Carl Huebschner has remained the same size, and so space is a big issue. This board has a vision to increase the available options in size. They plan to build a new building. This current building is vulnerable to natural disasters, to hurricanes. I don't think it's able to withstand more than a Category 2. And so I think in the past it had to be evacuated. And so Carl Huebschner needs a sound structure where patients can be safe in the event of a hurricane. There are plans to increase the services to be provided as well. I think Dr. Sosa had spoken about doing kidney transplants and also improving the cardiac, the cath lab, what we refer to as the cath lab, which is where procedures are done, life-saving procedures are done on the heart, where you don't need to be put under general anesthesia, etc. So increasing in size, increasing in service, and yet not increasing in the available space. So those are things that we need to look at for the future, for the medium and long term for Carl Huebschner. In the short term, it is getting through this wave of the pandemic. Yes, COVID is here to stay, and we will have to work around that. But this current phase is really taking a toll on the staff. It's taking a toll on the hospital finances. It's taking a toll on the hospital supplies. It's taking a toll on the patients. And so we are really hoping that the current phase will not be lingering for much longer, so that we can start to heal, the staff can start to recover, as they really will need to recover after this, at least those that are in that particular unit.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of support services that go along with that. It's not just the nurses and the doctors and the patients. You have the dietary, the kitchen, you have the maintenance staff, you have the cleaners, everybody. And so that group of persons, need to take their vacations, they need to recover, and then that would be the immediate attention that is needed
mental health too,
and
I
mental
hope.
health, yes.
Yeah. It's interesting because your experience with KHMH is wide-ranging. You've sat on the board and you've worked there as a nurse as well. So you understand already going into this some of the predictable challenges. And one has always been, and I know we don't discuss it as often, is the status of KHMH. It is a national referral hospital, but it is not a government hospital. And so while you may take very severe cases, what they call tertiary care, from some of the public clinics and hospitals, you are still with a subvention meant to earn for yourself. Now, that puts KHMH for a very long time in a very tricky predicament, because collecting on what is owed and even being able to keep costs at a reasonable place for the public is continuously a struggle to upkeep even the building, the staff, and everyone else. What are your thoughts on this, especially knowing the situation from the ground?
Certainly in that area, we will need to think outside of the box.
Yeah.
Carl Huchner has a $35 million outstanding debt from patients who have passed through the halls and haven't paid their hospital bills. It's not a free service, it's a tertiary institution, and it costs to run. Every single thing that is done for patient care has a cost, including human resources, oxygen, medication, surgery, operating theater, everything. And so I think Dr. Sosa, the chairman, spoke about looking at how we will handle that debt.
Yeah.
That is one issue, but then you have the continuing issue. We don't want that debt to build, and we want to be able to put the hospital on a more sustainable path. And so those are some of the areas that we will really need to sit and strategize to see how we can work out payment plans with patients, devise ways to ensure that people are able to pay their bills, because the cost of the services is very reasonable. And you're getting the same services in a lot of cases that the private institutions get, because in a lot of cases it's the same physicians that are doing the procedures. And so I think we need to have a wide open communication with the public. The hospital is the last place you think of going. And so it's not something that people plan for. We have a very low percentage of our population that has health insurance. And so in a lot of cases, when people become ill or they have an emergency, they really don't have any savings to sustain those types of tragedies or those types of illnesses. And so we have to engage the public, let them understand what healthcare costs, even go as far as promoting better lifestyles. So it's really going to be a culture change from the way people perceive Carl Huchner, and trying to establish more trust with the public, so that they are trusting that they are getting the best care, and the care that we are giving is affordable, and that they can provide some sort of repayment.
And and with all that said, there's a whole lot that has to be accomplished, and several people would be sort of daunted, or so based on your past experience made you feel ready to take on this sort of challenge, particularly at the time when we're experiencing the pandemic?
Yeah, people say you must be crazy.
Did you say yes?
I said, well, maybe. It took me a lot of thought I had to think about it a lot. I had to discuss it with my family a lot. I had to pray. I prayed a lot because I didn't get to this decision without some guidance from the Almighty. And I just felt that it was my calling. I feel like I still have the energy. I feel like I still have the passion to do it. And when, as I said, I saw that the board's visions and the board's aspirations were aligned with mine, I figured, well, do or die. And so I am ready to take the challenge. I'm ready to give it 100%, 1,000%, and hopefully yield some positive results.
Yeah, I think Dr. Sosa had said on our show that basically his vision is, his selections for filling the main staff at the KHMH is for persons who won't come in with the mentality that this is Belize and kind of elevating to another level. But you enter at a time where the institution is always at the center of controversy, and unfortunately so, because there are many success stories that come out of the KHMH. We don't get to hear them as often, but we do hear about the raccoon in the accident and emergency. We do hear about collapsing roofs or people who pass away in the parking lot. Building that relationship with the public is a key part, so people know what to expect if they go in for an emergency or to access any service. What are your thoughts there, at least for now?
Yes, I agree 100% with you, Marlene, and that is another area that Carl Huchner needs to improve on, because service and medical attention and nursing services, you know, they're excellent at this time. I mean, you can't compare it to any other place. Yes, maybe I'm being a little bit biased. But it's our communication and accessibility to the public and by the public. And so we need to improve our customer service access. And so if a customer, it's not customers in this case, it's patients, have an issue, have a concern, or a relative they have somewhere to go quickly and get an answer immediately, because I think that is part of the problem. People have, when someone is in a hospital, 99% of the time it's because they're ill. They have to have some procedure done. They have to recover from some illness, and so it's a very trying time for the patient and also for the family. And I think we tend to exclude the family, and really medicine is the care of patients and families, because the family might not be ill, but they're struggling to figure out how they're going to pay the bill. You know, they're worried. They have a million questions that they want answered, and I think that is where the gap is, where you have the patient and then you don't have that interaction with the patient and the family to be able to answer questions. So Carl Huchner has to become more open in communication, more accessible to the public and by the public, and be able to provide that customer service without using the word customer, so that people are able, and you know, yes, there is social media. You know, people love to rant on social media. I've had some very, very interesting things said about me on social media, because people, it's an opportunity for you to be anonymous, for want of, but you would really prefer that somebody, before they went to social media, they had the opportunity to resolve the problem first. And so that is some of the areas that I think we need to improve on. How we treat people, and when I say people, I mean both patients and families, and how we are accessible by the patients and by families, so that, you know, they have an opportunity to resolve their issues. Sometimes it's just a simple question that they need answered, and that in a time when you're worried and your finances are on the line, it can really turn into something big, when, you know, it could probably be resolved right within the walls of the KHMH.
What are some of the skill sets that you think you are bringing to the institution beyond your prior experience with the health KHMH itself? Well,
I am still currently employed with my employer at Social Security. I am ever so grateful for my experience that I have gained there, because I think that is going to help me a lot. as you know, currently we're dealing with customer care and customer service, and we have seen how important and how appreciative people are of being able to ask a question and get an answer, even if it's not the answer they want. You know, people deserve the respect of a response. I've, you know, had the opportunity to work with policy. We need to review policies at the KHMH, not only to write them or to review them, but to enforce them. Human resources is also an area that, you know, really needs a lot of support. And so there are vacancies in a lot of those positions that are currently being filled at the KHMH as well.
And in terms of some of what you want to accomplish, given, you know, all of, you know, even that what you mentioned just now, it's so multifaceted. Are there certain priority areas that you want to tackle immediately? And, you know, how do you prioritize based on, you know, the needs of the hospital?
Well, I am prioritizing a lot in my head. I haven't having the opportunity to get in there and review in any detail what the priorities might be as I move forward. I have a general idea. I've spoken to members of the board and I know what their expectations are. And so I'll ask you to ask me that question like about maybe a few weeks from now. I would be able to give you precisely what the priorities are going forward.
Yeah, and I hear that from you. I was telling you that before we start. I hear you ensuring that you temper expectations until you've done your first assessment.
I know that you know, I mean, the institution is in a financial pickle as well, because, you know, the expenses due to the COVID pandemic have been wreaking. You know, we are tripling the use of oxygen, tripling the use of the PPEs that the nurses have to wear, and all of those things, and we are not tripling the collections. And so we still have the same subvention from the government that we are trying to, or they are trying to stretch like chewing gum, in order to be able to be, you know, have enough oxygen, have enough. And so it's really a tough time because expenses are increasing, but collections are not, and so that's one of the areas that we really have to look at.
On the area of the staffing at the KHMH, are you planning to meet with the KHMH union or the Nurses Association to get a feel of their perspective from the ground?
Most definitely. I plan to meet every single person that works at the KHMH. It's almost 700 people. So I'll have 700 new friends. But definitely, the union is a very important partner. The Nurses Association, I think it's more the KHMH union that cover the workers of the KHMH. The Nurses Association is more for the district hospitals, I believe. And so, yes, most definitely, I already got a text from the union asking when they will be able to meet. So definitely they are number one on the top of the list of groups of persons that I will be meeting with.
Well, they've had a tough time because of what we outlined before. You know, they're not government workers, they're not public servants. They work with the KHMH. They don't get the same benefits as public servants. And I know it's been a long, drawn-out situation in trying to get the benefits that they feel that they deserve.
Yes, that's certainly one of the conversations. I think in one of the press releases, it seems that they are looking to have a seat at the table at the board level, and I think that would be very beneficial for the partnership that is necessary when those decisions are made, so that, you know, you have buy-in at the top and at the beginning, and try to avoid as much, you know, controversy as possible.
Yeah. Now, looking at the referral system in place as well is also something that has been a challenge. The public naturally, in an emergency, wants to go to the KHMH. Triaging is, as anyone would expect, very difficult. You know, when you start to prioritize that Gavin is more sick than Marlene, so we'll see him first, even though he just come. That becomes an issue itself. And for a long time, the KHMH has been concerned that people don't use some of the other public clinics. Now, COVID changes the landscape for all of this, but when we do get over the pandemic, it will be a returning issue. What are some thoughts there?
Yes, it's certainly because of Carl Hirschner Memorial Hospital falls within the health system of Belize, and so it's one of the dots on the map. And so usually for Belize City, it is the Belize City Hospital per se. So anytime there is an emergency or anytime somebody is ill that is from the Belize district, they go to KHMH. And so the hospital services the entire Belize district. However, when you have persons that are ill and are at the regional hospitals, then they would go to their regional hospital. What does happen in some cases is that we get referrals to the KHMH that perhaps can be treated at the regional hospitals. Then again, that's a drain on our resources if those people are not able to, cover the expenses and then the regional hospitals don't have those expenses anymore. So I think it's the partnership with the Ministry of Health and Wellness is extremely important as well.
Yeah.
And so it will probably take some time, sit down with them, maybe look at ways how we can support each other, and be able to, because yes, in Belize you do have the health centers, Matron Roberts and the Cleopatra White. There is a triage nurse at the KHMH. I think at this time it's only for quite a while now it has been only emergencies. So any non-emergency patient is referred to Cleopatra White or to Matron Roberts Health Center. But in a way, maybe it's a little bit of trust that they might have going to you have to look at it positively. And of course we want people to trust the Carl Hirschner Memorial Hospital. And so yes, those are areas that we will have to sit down and partner with the persons who can help and support, because I think that is extremely important as well.
Yeah. When you heard the stories of the nurses in the COVID-19 unit, that would have been around the same time you were applying or interviewing, I believe. I know doing the interviews, it was a highly emotional interview. What were your thoughts? And knowing especially that you were hoping to take over the leadership, what were some of the things that you thought in that moment, I wish I could be the CEO so I can do X, Y, Z?
It was as emotional for me as it was for everybody else. I think that if they could only have more staff, if they could only have mandatory breaks, if they could only have additional somebody that will drop the food there so that they don't have to worry about making food in the morning and taking it. Things like that, I think, would simply because of the uniqueness of the pandemic situation, where you have to be in this specific type of PPEs. You can't be coming in and out, and so it's really a unique situation that I don't think, well, many people, but Carl Hirschner has ever faced. And so I think for that group of persons, a little bit more support, logistically, and more importantly, psychologically. I don't know what the situation is in regards to psychological support for those persons. I've already had persons reach out to me and said, if you need my help, I write down all of their name. Because I was really, I was very happy to know that a lot of persons are offering support, are offering help. And so I hope to tap into some of those when the time is right.
And the nursing shortage?
I think they have recruited some new nurses. I haven't gotten the final numbers, but I think that is being addressed now.
Do you know what the vaccination rate is for employees of KHMH?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Because we know that with the new regulations, statutory bodies will be included as a part of the enhanced measures, that people must show proof of vaccination or a negative test.
Right.
If that's your first task to implement and you meet resistance, how do you imagine you'll handle that?
Well, thankfully there are regulations. I think first and foremost, I believe there's a fairly good uptake. I don't want to hazard a guess, but I think there's a fairly good uptake of vaccinations by the nurses and the doctors. The support services, I'm not too sure. But handling it would be simply following the regulations. You know, you guys, and I think more importantly, trying to convince them to get vaccinated, because it's really the safest for them and for the patients. You know, we recently lost the first nurse to COVID, and that, you know, that was not. I think Belize has done fairly well in regards to that statistic, but we really wouldn't want to lose any at all, and we are already short of staff. I think we do have staff that have been becoming positive with the new variant as well, but thankfully so far, you know, for the KHMH, everybody has been okay. But first and foremost, to try to convince them to get vaccinated, and then otherwise enforcing the regulations, rotating persons that may need to be rotated, etc.
Do you envision in the long term, and I'm really pushing you here to think ahead, that there should be, at least from the outside looking in, some restructuring to what's happening to the structure of KHMH? In other words, as a statutory body relying on part subvention and part cost of care?
Well, ideally, the KHMH would want to be as self-sustainable as possible. That, I think the chairman keeps saying that as well. That is really something that we will need to sit down and discuss, possibly establish partnerships with persons who can support. Again, think out of the box for fundraising and for collecting. Those are the things that I mean, a friend of mine shared a quote with me that stuck in my head, and it says that the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you will never sit. And I think that is how we need to look at the Carl Hitchner Memorial, not as a 3-year contract that I will do this, but you know, in the long-term vision, and to see, you know, 10 years from now, that it will be an institution that we can use the word excellent to describe.
And you know what I mean, I suppose, I guess, how would you then define like that sort of excellence? If you could put it into, like, in a nutshell and say that maybe one, like, let's say, positive change that you know you hope to accomplish.
That's a tough one, Gavin, because you want to improve service provision. You want to make the services available much better. Like Dr. said, Dr. Sosa mentioned, maybe going as far as doing the kidney transplants, improving in the cardiology unit, etc. So that would be one area. But then we also have the other area, which is having the financially sustainable institution. And so there are so many different moving parts of the hospital that it's hard to just define one. So it would probably have to be different, maybe like 3 or 4 different areas that we would have to zoom in on, as opposed to just one.
But is there anything that you think, I can't wait to have an impact in this area?
Probably the improvement in or the extension of services. I would love to see somebody in Belize get a kidney transplant. It's really a huge demand. But I would also want to see the staff be a little bit more, you know, relaxed, improve the working environment in some areas. So it's hard to pick one, Marlene.
Okay, so let me ask you the other question, and this is a very personal. Will you be an accessible CEO? Will we have to call the media, the public? Will we wait to see you on the rare occasion, or will the KHMH be more open-minded in its approach to the public?
No, definitely it will be much more open to the public. The gentleman who initiated that openness and communication for my current employment is sitting right here in this room, and you know, I really learned a lot from that experience. That people simply want access. They simply want a response. They simply want to have their questions answered. And that is certainly one of the first things that we will be looking at, or that I will be looking at, to ensure that yes, we are more open. Carl Huchner Memorial Hospital is the people's hospital. It's not for me. It's not for the government. It's really for the people of Belize. And so they're entitled to have whatever information they need, financial, service, whatever you need to know or want to know about the Carl Huchner, you should be able to know. Yes, there is a strict confidentiality protocol when it comes to patients. So you will never get a patient name from me. You will never, but information people want to know. I think there's a lot of questions about, who in the COVID unit? They have pre-existing conditions? Do they? How old are they? That sort of information the people want to know, and I think the public should have access to that sort of information. So yes, certainly you can expect a more open communication channels.
All right. And
I was going to ask one aspect which you touched on a little bit earlier, is dealing with sort of just the infrastructure of the hospital itself. And you had mentioned its preparedness for hurricanes, and Marlene had also mentioned some of the other pre-existing issues. How do you feel about tackling that particular aspect, because that also has a lot to do with the sustainability of the hospital as well?
Yes, I think the biggest challenge will be to source the funding. We have a maintenance and operations unit at Carl Huchner, very familiar with those processes. I think it was 2013 where they built the neonatal intensive care unit. That was when I was on the board. So the process has been done before, but the challenge would probably be to source the funding and to be able to make the payments, and so I don't think that it is too big of a task that we would not be able to do it.
And what about things like, just lastly, triggered in my mind, what about things like residential programs? You have some GPs, general practitioners who've been working in one unit for a long time. If they were at a training hospital, they would already be specialized.
Yes, that is an area that the board is also looking into. Precisely what you said, improving the residences and the residency access to the Carl Huchner Memorial as a teaching hospital.
All right. Well, we are out of time, and this is only the introductory interview, but you can look right into that camera, because as you said, it is the People's Hospital, and people want to hear from you. So you can share your closing thoughts with the public.
Well, I would just like to ask for, persons to just bear a little bit of patience, and as we start the process of reviewing, and I always tell persons, any ideas you might have, any suggestions you might have, we are open to listening. That will be a large part of what I do initially, will be to listen. Like I said, it's a large staff, a large group of persons. We want to hear from everyone. We can't do everything that everybody wants, but we are willing to listen and make some positive changes and improve the trust that people have, or that the people have with the Carl Huchner Memorial Hospital. Looking forward to those partnerships.
All right. Well, we plan to check back in with you and see how it's going, but thank you for coming in and having this first discussion with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, the focus will be on climate change, so please stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service. Working off-site doesn't mean you have to be off your game. Studies have shown that simply adding a keyboard and mouse to your laptop increases productivity by 26%. Add a monitor, and you'll be 35% more productive. At Fulltech Systems, we have what you need to enhance your remote work or e-learning experience. With devices such as headsets, video conferencing monitors, webcams, keyboards, mice, docking stations, all with the brands you trust. Keep connected with collaboration tools like Microsoft 365 Suite and Kaspersky and perform efficiently no matter where you are. Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
It's a fact that your credit lasts longer when using Smart. During these times, we're all trying to find ways to cut costs and save the little resources we have. With Smart, it's easy to do that. It's a fact that with Smart, your credit lasts longer. You can call Smart to Smart and Smart to Digi using your promo credit, while with the other guy, you can only call OnNet, Digi, or BTL numbers. What does this mean? You get to call any national number using your promo credit. Your promo credit is free, so that call is also free. Know your facts. Don't be tricked by the other guy. Be smart and save your dollars.
Vaccines protect you and they protect me. Getting vaccinated is one of the most important things you can do to keep yourself and your family safe and healthy. Once enough people are immunized, opportunities for an outbreak of disease becomes very low. And if we all choose to get vaccinated, we contribute in getting back to spending quality time with our loved ones in a safe way.
Life can be tough when a loved one suddenly departs. Dependents of the deceased are sometimes left alone to pick up the pieces and may be stranded financially. Fortunately, the Social Security Board provides survivor's benefit to ease the burden. Survivor's benefit is paid to a widow or widower, children under 18 years, or up to 21 years if attending school, or dependent parents. A survivor's benefit can be either a grant or a pension. Want to know more about survivor's benefit? Visit our website or contact any of our offices to have someone assist you. Also, be sure to visit our Facebook page and give us a like to stay informed. Social Security Board, safeguarding you, your family, your future.
And we're back. And if you're joining us now, we are getting our second conversation for this morning started. And we are joined now by the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, Dr. Colin Young. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to both of you, and good morning to the viewing public.
Yes, so shifting gears to talk about climate change now, this is a really interesting, well, the whole topic of climate change is interesting, but perhaps for the benefit of some of our viewers, you could give us a little bit of background about what the center is and what it does.
Okay. Thank you very much. The Caribbean Community Climate Change Center is headquartered in Belize, and it has been here since 2005. It is a CARICOM institution. As a result, by mandate of all of the CARICOM heads of government. It is the only institution in the region that is mandated specifically to coordinate the Caribbean's response to climate change. And so we work with all of the 15 CARICOM member states, and we work primarily to provide data, climate-related data, that we then provide to policymakers so they can make evidence-based decisions about how they plan to do development activities and initiatives. The other area that we work with member states is by trying to work with them to access financing, climate change financing, to build climate resilience, climate adaptation, as well as to transition certain sectors like energy from fossil fuels to renewable energy, or from transport into more greener energy. And the third area that we work with is in coordinating amongst the political directorate, CARICOM's position going into international climate change negotiations, so that we go there with a united front and a united voice to highlight and amplify those areas that are important to us in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So that's what we do at the Climate Change Center.
Yeah. Now, it is absolutely, it's an interesting time because the entire world is preparing for the COP conference coming up at the end of October into November. And I just wanted to ask you, it seems that there is a shift globally where all the climate change deniers, their voices are quieter as we see so many different impacts across the globe for climate change. I think I read somewhere where it said we can stop saying climate change, we can say climate change because we're seeing the impact. Tell me how this sets the backdrop for Belize and the Caribbean going into COP.
That's a very good point, Marlene. And unfortunately, while there has been, for example, the publication of this landmark 6th assessment report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that really sort of provide the kind of backative that we've always been saying that, look, climate change is happening. It's happening all over the world. Global temperatures are rising faster than we thought. We have about 20 years to pursue actions today to stop us from arriving at sort of critical threshold. But yet, even with all of that, and even with the floods we're seeing in Germany, the wildfires in Greece, the strong hurricanes we're seeing in this part of the region and elsewhere, global action has been less than desirable. People would remember that in 2015, in the historic Paris Agreement, I was in the room in Paris at the time when 191 countries committed to a whole set of actions that we'll undertake to keep global temperatures below 1.5. And here we are in 2020. The IPCC report telling us that we'll get there in 20 years. We see the G20, we see the G7 meeting and talking and not enough action. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change just a few weeks ago published what they call a synthesis report. This report looks at all of the actions called the nationally determined contributions that countries submit to say that I will do A, B, and C to help reduce global temperatures. When they added up all of that and look at how much carbon emissions will be cut, it still gets us way above the 1.5 degree. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's still a lot of talk and not enough action. And even though our countries in the region are small, the Caribbean contributes less than 1% of the global emissions of greenhouse gases that cause global warming. But we are at the forefront of the war on the impacts of climate change. So we are being pummeled, we are being impacted, or people are being severely impacted by the effects of climate change, but yet we are undertaking actions to cut our emissions, in some cases proportionally greater than some of the larger countries. And so at COP26, when we expect over 30,000 delegates to show up, we are hopeful that the small countries in SIDS, the small island developing states, can continue the diplomatic pressure to put on the largest of emitters, including those in the G20, to do their fair share to ensure that global temperatures are kept below 1.5.
I imagine after hearing what you just said, you were one of the many people across the Caribbean clapping when you heard Prime Minister Motley say at the UN that the needle has not moved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me just bring it back for a moment, though, because I think it's one of the things that in talking about climate change, we can be very technical. It is technical when you talk about emissions and whatnot. But when we allow people to understand one of the key points that you said there, which is we are not the main contributors, but we are the ones who feel it the most. And in Belize, for example, although I know you represent the Caribbean, we know things like erosions. We know changing temperatures and even predictability for agriculture and marine resources, coral bleaching,
sargassum.
Sargassum. So there's so many different things that we hear about that we are challenged with that can be attributed back to this issue. How do you keep that message as something that all Caribbean citizens can be able to understand, especially when we head into these negotiations?
I think you rightly framed it, Marlene, because while the conversation for climate change and global warming has largely been an academic one, in truth, our people all over the region have been experiencing the effects of climate change. So they know it firsthand. They may not call it climate change or that, you know, that the CO2 emissions have increased by X. No, but the farmer who is seeing more frequent droughts and their crops are not growing and they're losing money and they are one drought away from going into bankruptcy, those people know that the rains don't come as they were expected to. Because in Belize, for example, we know that the rainy season starts in June. And so farmers have aligned the planting of their crops for when the rains are expected to come. But because one of the effects of climate change is increased droughts or changing the timing at which the rain comes, a month or two off can have a disastrous impact on that farmer. The same thing with human health. You know, when we look at what increased temperatures does to heat waves that have a disastrous impact on construction workers and anybody who has to work outside in the farm, heat stress is a much bigger issue. When we see the resort owners and the people who live in coastal towns where they have to be spending all this money to try to keep the sea from out of their house or from getting rid of their beaches. These are all impacts of climate change. When the tour guides are taking tourists to the reef and they're seeing the coral bleaching and they're seeing less fish and the fishermen and fisherwomen are catching less fish, all of these things are associated with climate change. So for the people, trying to link that experience to now with climate change, I think is relatively easy. We need to do a better job at it by making it practical. But they know because they're feeling the effects of it. What has been missing is that we have been clamoring for over a decade, saying to the international community, these things are happening. And it's not a hoax. Climate change is not a hoax. We're feeling it. You promised that you would do a number of things to help. One of them is to cut back your activities that pollutes the environment in terms of greenhouse gases. Another one is that you would provide money, $100 billion per year to countries who need it.
Like us.
And up to now, this has been done since 2009, the international community has not delivered that promise. And the third is that they would also provide technology and technology transfer that would allow our countries to adapt. So this is a climate justice issue. We don't cause the problem, we are suffering the effects of the problem, and then you're dilly-dallying. Those of you who are causing the problem, you're dilly-dallying, you're putting all kinds of bureaucracy in place, you're talking and not doing what you need to do to keep the world's temperature below this critical threshold.
Is there, earlier you had, you used the term, you know, to apply sort of the diplomatic pressure to get them to do that. Is there sort of a strategy or coordinated strategy among, you know, I suppose within, you know, the 5 Cs, but also among all of these member states, or states, sorry, who are sort of experiencing the brunt of the issues, you know, in the way that you described?
Yeah, so what we normally do is that the center helps to coordinate along with the, and you rightly said, the member states, because the CARICOM member states. And so, for example, on October 15th, we have the last pre-COP, what we call the pre-preparatory meeting with ministers and senior policymakers, at which point we hope to issue a declaration that is CARICOM's, a CARICOM declaration on what we expect to get from the COP and what is it that the political leaders are demanding of the world leaders in this space. So we do that leading up to the COP. We also participate in helping to support youth voices. There's recently a youth parliament in which we supported. There's the Caribbean Youth Network that we support, as well as other vulnerable groups, women, youth, and indigenous peoples, because the more voices that we have joining this this conversation, the better it is. Yeah. And so that's how we do it. At the end of the day, we are small. We are not mighty in terms of any kind of wielding any kind of economic power. Yeah. But when we are united as a large set of countries, we can exert political pressure or diplomatic pressure on the largest of the countries. So that is what we hope to do. And now the science is absolutely clear. So they can no longer say, oh, but we're uncertain about A, B, and C. Now we have the kind of scientific underpinnings to justify why it is that we are demanding as small island states that we have to keep global temperatures below 1.5, because after that, the impacts on this part, on our countries, would be so devastating, it's hard to get people to understand. Yeah. But I'll give you one. The estimates are saying that if we get to 1.5 degrees Celsius above from what we were in 1850, that you will have a 70 to 90% reduction in coral reefs. 70 to 90% reduction. Now think of what that would mean for the tourism industry in a country like Belize and any other country that has reefs. Think of what that would mean for the fisher folks who depend on the reef, right? So I talk about food security, you know, and just that one thing. So then when you look at what is expected to happen for hurricanes, the category 4 and 5s, the Caribbean State of the Climate Report is saying that under some of these scenarios, you can expect up to an 80% increase in these types of
and we've been
monstrous storms. Now, one category, luckily Belize has been spared. Some of our Caribbean nations have not been so lucky to be spared the category 5s. But we saw what it did to Dominica. 225% of its GDP gone in a few hours by a category 5 hurricane. You know what that does to the sustainable development aspirations of a people? You know what it does to the poverty and all of the other essential services that the government has to provide for its people? Now, you would expect that the international community who is causing this problem would be the first to jump in line to provide the financing to help you rebuild, because we didn't cause it. And that is one of the fights we've been having. You know, to one, deliver what you promise, because you're not doing that. And two, don't pretend that you're not responsible for this and then try to find all kinds of ways to delay getting that money to us.
Well, what has changed? And I appreciate what you're talking about with impact of changing temperatures on coral reefs, but we also here in Belize City, the rising sea levels, that's a major concern for us. But as you talk about powerful storms, Dr. Young, one of the things, and I don't say it casually because people have lost property and lives, but these larger countries, these quote unquote more powerful countries are now feeling the impact as well. With these major storms, with flooding that they've never seen in years, wildfires that they couldn't fathom, they are now seeing these types of things taking place. Do you think that will have an impact in the decision-making process this time around?
I am absolutely hopeful that it will have an impact, because for the first time, some of the countries are seeing what we have been experiencing for so long. And even though as bad as it is in those countries, over the last year or two, without sounding insensitive, that is a small portion of what we have been experiencing in this part of the world. The difference, of course, is they have the money, they have the technology, they have the means to be able to bounce back. Those of us in the Caribbean, we don't. Let me perhaps share a staggering number with the Belizean public. Belize is ranked as one of those countries that are very, very vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And each year, about 7% of our GDP is lost in equivalent from damages related to climate change. 7% of our losses equivalent to GDP. That means now that, and if you think of what our GDP grows, even before COVID, you know, you're talking about 1%, 2%, but then you're losing the equivalent of about 7%. So when the farmers have a $30 million drought up north, when there's big floods that wash away a bridge, and that the government has to rebuild, or wash away a road, or cause this kind of massive erosion where critical infrastructure, and you have to spend that money. When you add all of that up, from the rains, from the floods, from the droughts, from storms, that comes up to about 7% of GDP per year, right? That is on an average year. That's not with a category 5 or a 4 or a 3 hurricane. So you're absolutely right. I'm hoping, against all odds, that with the science being very clear, with the larger countries suffering and seeing, and their people suffering directly now the impacts of climate change, that would spur the political will. Because at the end of the day, this is a political decision for the leaders to do what it takes to change the course of history as it relates to the temperature increase.
And the agreement has already been made for climate financing. And that's a critical push, because when you talk about what it costs us, the $100 billion that should be allotted for those who are most vulnerable for mitigation and prevention, what is the I mean, how much would this be able to help? And also, how do you distribute it equitably, if we can get there, this is optimistic, to ensure that countries like Belize, who faced a lot of impact and who will probably face more impact, can get their fair share?
The access to, so one, Marlene, when they say that we have 100 billion, then it's not automatic, right? And so one of the issues that countries have been saying for at least a decade is that, look, you have to provide this money because that's your obligation, but then don't make it so difficult that it's almost impossible to get. And so access is a key issue. And so in that is one of the areas that the 5Cs works with member states, because we have at the center the capacity to both access and to manage these projects. We have since 2005 mobilized over $260 million on behalf of member states to do the work. At the same time, we are working with countries to build their capacity so that the countries can access money directly from the donor countries or from the Green Climate Fund or the adaptation, other financial mechanisms. Because they have all of these fiduciary requirements that you have to have all of these policies that respond to a whole number of things. And while you're talking about putting these things in place, and while it takes you 3 to 4 years to get some money, you know how many climate-related disasters you will have in 4 years while you're just trying to get access to 1 million or 3 million or 5 million. So sometimes it's very upsetting, because they make it very difficult for small countries like those of us in CARICOM to access this money. And it takes so long to get the money that the circumstances under which you're trying to fix when you started the process of getting the money had changed by the time you're getting the money. So our political leaders have been saying over and over again, look, you need to simplify the way that we can get money, because this is not a favor that you're doing to us. This is an obligation that you agreed to as part of the Paris Agreement, and you are causing the problem. You see? And the other side of this that is very also upsetting is that not only are we suffering the impacts of the effects of climate change, but in many cases, in fact in all the cases, our countries have to incur debt to be able to respond to some of the climate-related disasters. When a road is washed away, or a bridge is washed out, some countries actually have to borrow loans to fix that back up. And so we already have high debt levels, which means that you're getting further in the red while you're still talking about all of the processes we have to follow to come and get a little bit of money.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be, part of my next question, because I was going to say more, how is it then, or to what extent does the center sort of deal with a lot of those immediate concerns or address some of the immediate impacts, given these difficulties, in accessing funding and sort of the international, just the circumstances that we're working with now. What are some of the ways that we can, that we work to sort of address those the impacts as we face them?
We try to work, for example, the center is accredited to the Green Climate Fund, which is one of the financial mechanisms under the Climate Change Convention. And we try to do what we call a programmatic approach. We work with multiple countries who want to pursue similar actions, and then try to access monies to work in multiple countries at the same time. We also work with the member states to access funding to improve the capacity of the focal points in the governments across the region, so that they are aware of all of the processes that are required to access money. And then on the big side, sort of one of the big side of the center, as I said, is that we work on trying to ensure that we have the climate data, which then provides the rationale as to why we need certain amounts of money, and if we get the money, what is the expected impact of that investment going to be on people's lives and livelihoods. So because when you go to the donors and they say, look, I want $20 million to do drainage improvement in St. Ignacio town, so that when you have a lot of rain, it doesn't flood out the towns. They want to know, well, okay, so what is going to be the impact on the people? Have you done the feasibility studies that will show that kind? So while the feasibility study might take a year or two, but the people in St. Ignacio and the people in other parts of Belize know that when there's a lot of rain, we always get flood. Yeah. So that data.
Look at the floods of last year.
Correct. Yeah. And then you're saying, but you just can't go and show them pictures and say, see, this is what.
This has never happened before.
Right? You have to go and there's a whole process of finding out, well, how often is this likely to happen? Yeah. What is the impact of it? And then you say you want to do A, B, and C. And if you do that, how is that going to reduce it? Yeah. And what is the climate adaptation incremental cost? Because they're saying, oh, some of that stuff is just normal development. We don't fund that. We only fund the portion that would do the climate resilient piece, right? Again, upsetting.
Yeah, of course. Even hearing you explain it, and I think one of the things too is also acknowledging that there will be an impact, even if these targets are hit. The goal is to minimize the change within our climates, but we are seeing and continue to see. And I think one of the examples that just always startles me is again the rising sea levels. What's the prediction with what we are facing today?
About 0.4 meters, and almost half a meter in sea level. Now that sounds.
And for a place like Belize City, that is.
Oh, that's going to cause not only Belize City, but if you look at San Pedro, Kikaka, they're literally at sea level. Portions of Belize City are below sea level, and so you could expect that a substantial part of the city would be underwater. Already we have what we call this nuisance flooding, right? Where when the tides are high, already you're starting to see
a little bit of rain.
A little bit of rain. Yeah. Now, to put that number in perspective, a rule of thumb, right, is that every 1 inch of sea level rise will flood 100 inches of beach. So 1 foot of sea level rise will flood 100 feet of land. 1 meter, that's 3 feet roughly, 300 feet. So we don't have to look far.
Yeah.
In terms of Belize to see this. Go to Monkey River.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, that's what I was
Monkey River has lost over almost about 1,200 feet of beach in the last 30 years or so. About 4 or 5 rows of houses have completely
Families have lost
disappeared.
homes,
The
yeah.
cemetery is now about to be lost. Because you go down there and you see some sandbags trying to keep the sea from washing the graves out. You go to Hopkins, you go to Placencia, Dangriga, you go to San Pedro, you go to Kikaka. You're starting to see, now what you're seeing now is nothing compared to what we will expect if we get to that 1.5 degree I've been talking about.
Yeah, and I guess that's a great point that you'll drive home. That it's not a matter of waiting for finances to mitigate. It's actually to stop what's taking place and to somehow salvage the situation. Let me ask you, do you feel that the Caribbean voice is given sufficient space in these negotiations as nations that are most vulnerable to impact?
The Caribbean, the quick answer to that is I'm not sure we are given the space, but we demand the space. And the region has been very successful in sort of navigating through the negotiations. So the Belize is part of CARICOM, and we negotiate in the climate change negotiations as part of the Alliance of Small Island States called AOSIS. And we have some, we are few in number, but we have some of the best negotiators that exist. And so, for example, it is because of that kind of work that we were successful in getting the 1.5 degree temperature goal into the Paris Agreement. So we have very experienced and dedicated and competent negotiators who then negotiate and tries to influence positions and that outcomes that come from these global meetings. Now, sometimes there are the kind of horse trading that happens, and that is when the region, also when we are united, we tend to get the best outcomes, meaning that if there is something that a particular country or group of countries want, and they want the support of the 15 CARICOM countries in terms of a vote, you know, then sometimes what happens is that there are these negotiations that then allows either a particular country to deliver more financing to a country or to try to influence some of their colleagues to take more bolder action. So there's some of that. Now, when the leaders go, as they will, for COP26 at the end of October, you know, that is, as I said, it's a diplomatic thing. The negotiators, they try to negotiate amongst themselves. You have some countries that are outright blocking. You know, they don't want to make any progress. And ultimately, when you can't go any further, you bring in the political leaders, and hopefully they can structure a deal.
My question is, and you know, not getting too technical here, but having recognized that there's a need for expedited action on all fronts, in cutting down emission and also in being able to support countries that are impacted. But to have this meeting in the middle of a pandemic, so many of these nations have an easy out to say, well, look, we are battling a health crisis. Do you foresee that to be? I mean, what's the plan? You can almost expect that you will hear that.
Marlene, that is a very difficult issue. How do we balance the climate change crisis with the COVID crisis and then trying to have this meeting in the middle of the pandemic? Generally, what has been the case, at least the signals that we're hearing, is that on a regular year, outside of a pandemic, these negotiations are so difficult. And generally, we don't get the kind of outcomes we want. So if we're not there in person, it's going to be even worse, right? Because of the issues of access and bandwidth, the time zone difference, and how do you effectively participate. It's one thing to sit aside across the table from somebody and stare them in the eye and tell them what their lack of action is causing for you. And when you're on a Zoom call or some kind of platform where they don't even have their video on, they can be doing completely something else and you don't know. So there has been a general preference for an in-person meeting, simple because this particular COP is so important for global action that if we are not there, we worry about what is the outcome. But by going there, then we're also exposing ourselves to the pandemic and all of the complicated logistics that go with that. The UK already has quarantine requirements for people coming from countries that are red listed. You have to quarantine for 5 days if you are vaccinated and 10 days if you're unvaccinated. Luckily, they have promised to pick up the cost for the quarantine, but how you get from one country to the COP and back, all of that is an unknown. And as it is, while the region is preparing to have representation, we are still trying to ascertain what that representation will look like because of the costs and because of the worry about the pandemic. So we might have a scaled back representation this year, hopefully by October 15th, because of the centers working with the CARICOM Secretariat, we would have more of an understanding of who's going.
And as we close, because we are out of time as much as this is a pressing issue, what do you say to Belizeans about why they should tune in, why they should be up to date as to what's going to happen come the end of October into November?
Because Belizeans and all the people in the region need to be tuned in because climate change is impacting all of their lives. It's impacting some people's lives even more than it's impacting others. And so you have to be worried in terms of ensuring that our governments across the region are also doing all they can to ensure that with the little resources they have, that they're putting it in those areas that is going to impact positively the resilience of the people. Meaning, you know, if you're going to be building a road or a school or whatever it is, have you factored in the climate risk? Right? Have you factored in the climate risk? And if so, then make sure that it's built so it can withstand some of the increases that is expected to happen. Farmers, obviously, fisher folks, and so on, who are at the tourism. These are sectors that climate change has an absolutely significant impact on year after year. You need to be tuned in so that you can see what is it that you can do and how we can all work collectively to ensure that there are the national level policies and laws and regulations that are being done to help to protect the environment. For example, a simple one in terms of protecting and conserving mangroves, right? And how important that is to buffer against coastal erosion and things like that, and hurricanes and so on.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing this same kind of passion as well, because there is a reality that must be told to the rest of the world, and definitely we'll be tuning in to find out more. Thank you for coming in and having this discussion.
Thank you both. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about a mandatory training on child abuse. We'll tell you the details in a few. Stay tuned.
As one of the largest cable and internet providers in Belize, CBC strives to provide our customers with the highest standards of quality, value, and service in all aspects of cable TV and internet. Monitoring our systems closely, our technicians combine creative planning and state-of-the-art technology with years of experience and training to develop and provide the most reliable and advanced cable and internet service to exceed your expectations. For CBC and our team of talented engineers, technicians, and customer service representatives, delivering less than the very best is never an option.
To decrease your risk of being bitten by infected mosquitoes, use proven personal protective methods too. apply an effective mosquito repellent to exposed areas of skin according to manufacturer's instructions. Wear light-colored long pants and shirts while outdoors in the early morning and late afternoons. Further, protect vulnerable family members like pregnant women, children, the elderly, and persons who are unwell by using mosquito nets to sleep or rest, even during the day. Fight the bite and protect yourself and your family too from mosquito-borne diseases.
Hey son, how was your first day at sixth form?
Really cool. It was great to see my friends, and I really love my teachers.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm sorry I wasn't there for your first day, but I'll be back from Corozal next week.
It's okay, Dad. I can't wait to see you. Oh, and please remember, I still have some books I need to purchase.
Ah, yes. Let me e-cash you that right now. Money has been sent. I add a little extra cash just for you.
Whoa, Dad. Thanks. Got it.
You're welcome, sir.
Download the eCash app today and take your first step into a cashless lifestyle. For more information, visit www.e-cash.com or contact us via WhatsApp at 613-0257. eCash, the future is here.
Bringing people together has always been SMART's mission and passion. That is why we are proud to have built a locally independent quality network from the ground up that spans the country with over 100 sites. We continue to add more affordable mobile data packages, broadband speeds, and voice services to meet your personal and business needs. SMART has set the standard of true competition with the most competitive prices on all services offered. We invite and welcome you to join the SMART family, where the value for your dollar matters. SMART will continue bringing new technologies, more affordable prices, network expansions, and people together. SMART, bringing people together.
Life can be tough when a loved one suddenly departs. Dependents of the deceased are sometimes left alone to pick up the pieces and may be stranded financially. Fortunately, the Social Security Board provides survivor's benefit to ease the burden. Survivor's benefit is paid to a widow or widower, children under 18 years, or up to 21 years if attending school, or dependent parents. A survivor's benefit can be either a grant or a pension. Want to know more about survivor's benefit? Visit our website or contact any of our offices to have someone assist you. Also, be sure to visit our Facebook page and give us a like to stay informed. Social Security Board, safeguarding you, your family, your future.
And we're back.
Yep, and if you're joining us right now, we are getting our third and final conversation for this morning started, and we are shifting gears to talk about a very important initiative, Pathlight, UNICEF, and the National Organization for the Prevention of Child
Abuse.
Child abuse, are collaborating to host a mandatory training on how to deal with child abuse. And joining us for the conversation, we have Consuelo Godfrey, who is the Director of Teacher Training with Pathlight. We have Melanie Barnes, who is the Spotlight Coordinator for UNICEF. And we are also joined by Denby York, who is the Director of the National Organization for the Prevention of Child Abuse. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Morning, Gavin and Marlene.
And thank you for joining us. This is a very important issue that perhaps doesn't get enough attention. So perhaps we can start, perhaps Consuelo, you can give us a little bit of background on the initiative and what it hopes to accomplish.
Thank you, Gavin and Marlene, for having us this morning. Pleasure to be here. I'm representing Pathlight Belize. And with me, we have Ms. Marlene from UNICEF and Mr. Denby from NOPCAN. Our partnership started all the way back in 2020 when UNICEF approached Pathlight in tandem with the work that NOPCAN has been doing with regards to training teachers in the mandatory processes and protocols for child and suspected cases of child abuse. And so the partnership blossomed into a successful project where we were able to train over 1,000 teachers across the country in the protocols for reporting suspected cases of child abuse and human trafficking, as well as understanding the process and the procedures that they need to go through when they report such cases to the Department of Human Services or the police department. Ms. Marlene will speak a little bit more about the Spotlight Initiative. As you know, Pathlight Belize is an NGO nonprofit organization. We serve over 150 students in scholarships to secondary school and comprehensive wraparound service. But we also train teachers, and our teacher training department has trained hundreds of teachers in our program for professional development via our partnership with the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Culture, and Science. And so it is through that partnership we were able to collaborate with UNICEF. The Spotlight Initiative, as you know, is funded by the EU, and the UNICEF has been working in many initiatives regarding this violence against women and girls, violence against children, and NOPCAN, being no stranger to that advocacy movement, has been doing this type of training face-to-face for many years with teachers. And it was through this project we decided to digitize the materials that was being offered through NOPCAN services face-to-face, so we could have a better impact with teachers across the country and certainly train a lot more teachers virtually, seeing that we weren't able to go into schools face-to-face to do that.
So let's hear from Denby about the training to teachers. And I want to start off from the onset to talk about mandatory reporting itself. Who is a mandatory reporter?
Good morning. First and foremost, the program is a national program, and it is an activity of the children's agenda, which, as I think we need to know, is the framework of the NCFC, and it is intended, if you will, to comply with government's commitment to strengthen the child protection system. The mandatory reporting of child abuse comes from the regulation, the child abuse reporting regulation. As a result, it intends to reach out to all professionals, those whose work or employment bring them in contact on a regular basis with children. And so this program sets out to, if you will, not only provide knowledge of the indicators of detection of child abuse, but also the protocols, the procedures for reporting. But it goes well beyond that, because we are doing it in context, of course, and you'll realize that we are looking to change minds. It's the mindset. People hold certain views in relation to how to go about disciplining children, how to go about helping children to develop, providing services for children. And there is a paradigm shift in terms of the way culturally we went about, if you will, providing services for children, how we help children within the classroom, outside the classroom, and particularly within the homes. Mm-hmm. And so this program is intended, if you will, to reach right across the board, whether it be violence against parents within their homes, domestic violence against women and girls, whether it be the way law enforcement manage children, when they come in conflict with the law, and also within the school system where children, as you know now, capital punishment is prohibited.
Yes.
How do teachers, if you will, now go about providing the necessary methodology that will enable children to acquire the academics and develop?
Yes.
And Malene, perhaps you can also join in to explain a little bit about Spotlight's role in this initiative.
Good morning. Good morning, Gavin and Marlene. Thank you for inviting us to be here. So the Spotlight Initiative for Belize is focused on family violence and as it affects women and children. And so it was important for us to engage partners that address family violence across the spectrum, and with Pathlight looking at how we train teachers, and with the support of NOPCAN, train teachers to identify abuse in children, but also at the same time, one of the benefits of being a part of the training was that teachers were able to also address their own issues with abuse and violence. One of the things that the training highlighted is that, help to bring to the fore what really constitutes as child abuse and as issues related to family violence. Sometimes because of our own social understanding of these topics, we don't really understand or connect what we're experiencing, whether it's as children or even as adults. These experiences as violence and the kind of trauma imprint it leaves in our mind, in our psyche as we grow older. Yeah. So the training with Pathlight with the teachers had although it was focused on giving them the skills, the tools to recognize and to access the reporting mechanism for children, it also provided them with an opportunity to do some reflection of their own situations and give them access to support mechanisms for the adults, for teachers, in terms of psychosocial and mental health support that they would need to address these kinds of things that came up in the training.
So, Consuelo, it's a mandatory training. How are the schools identified?
Right. So I know there might be a little mix-up. The training isn't mandatory. We would like and hope that.
Oh, I was wondering. Yeah.
Yes, all schools would be able to afford their teachers the opportunity to do this, because teachers are mandatory reporters. So the training is on the mandatory reporting mechanism, right? Processes and procedures. And we have had a record number of schools calling us, asking for the training. We've trained 1,186 teachers, and we've impacted 108 schools from January on up until the end of July this year. However, our goal at Pathlight, through the efforts of UNICEF as well as NOPCAN, is to continue this training online through the development of a webinar course that teachers can then access on the Teacher Learning Institute that is being promoted currently at the Ministry of Education. Yeah. And so we don't want that, because the project is over, where we had offered the synchronous training via Pathlight. We don't want teachers to not have the opportunity to be able to access the training outside of that project's limitations. Yeah. So we are working together. Myself, Ms. Malene, and Mr. Denby are working together to see how we can continue the sustainability of training, because eventually, and I'm sure Ms. Malene and Mr. Denby would attest to this, we want all the teachers trained in these procedures and protocols, because as you know, Malene and Gavin, teachers are with students mostly the most hours of the day. Yeah. When we go back to face-to-face teaching, even online, teachers might be able to, they will be able to be better equipped with identifying suspected cases of child abuse, or because abuse can take many forms, trauma that's happening in the home with children, and what's going on with students. And more of that will be even more highlighted when students come back because now they've been at home so long. Exposure to those trauma and those types of abuses are even more pertinent now because they're at home more than they used to be. And so this even drives the initiative to make sure that it's sustainable. So our goal at Past Life, because we love our teachers, we support our teachers, we want to be able to offer this to more teachers and be able to offer it to more schools across the country.
And as you said that, you know, you've gotten so much calls for people wanting to access the service, do you also get a sense from that and through your previous work with other teachers that this is something that is that teachers are encountering and that they really are, you know, frequently, and that they want means to sort of deal with it better? Do you get a sense that it is a very pressing and widespread issue in terms of abuse?
Yes, and two, I know Mr. Denby has been doing this for so many years, so his experience with the face-to-face training, he would have had some impact with answering that question. But from my experience with the 1,000 teachers that we've trained, we found a couple of things, key things that came out of it. One, a lot of our teachers are also survivors of abuse themselves and trauma and violence. We also have discovered that there has
untreated as well, right?
When we say untreated, perhaps they may not have gotten the help at the time to be able to overcome or get the level of support. However, having been impacted by this training, we find that teachers now are fully understanding what the process is, not just for the students, but for themselves. And what happens when those reports are made to DHS or the police department regarding suspected cases of abuse. And what we've also found in our training is that many of our students, many of our teachers didn't know what to do and how to proceed with the process. And so because NOPCAN had developed such great initial training, and we just simply digitized a lot of what they had already developed, and because of the good work that UNICEF has been doing on the ground here in Belize through the Spotlight Initiative, we have found that teachers are aware, but this training solidifies the understanding of the process and the procedures. And Past Life was more than happy to join that fight with UNICEF and NOPCAN and want to continue doing that. But those were some of the those were some of the surprising things that came out of that training.
Maleni, if you could tell us for a moment, because I think it's interesting. When we talk about abuse, people think physical. So they expect to see, you know, bruises or physical evidence of physical abuse. But when you talk about trauma, and, you know, them being exposed to violence at home and how that may be evidence in their behavior, or sexual violence and how that can be evident in their behavior. What was the level of knowledge at the start of the training towards the end? I mean, how many teachers actually knew that they could see signs without seeing physical evidence?
That's a very interesting statement, Marlene. And one of the things we have found, even with the baseline study that was done for family violence, a lot of people know that violence is not just physical, but it's part of the behavior change that we are working towards that actually takes into consideration when persons share their psychological experiences with violence, or the emotional impact that violence has had on them, that it is recognized and taken seriously, because we are very visual, and so we expect only to address the visual signs of violence. And so part of the process, even with reporting emotional, psychological violence with the duty bearers, is that they also are not fully cognizant of how to handle or how to respond to these kinds of violence, so it's overlooked. But the sense that we got is that persons know that these are also characteristics of violence. It's just how to manage it, how to refer persons to the appropriate services beyond the police, what kinds of services were available. So one of the things that the Spotlight Initiative is doing through its funding from the EU is to bring the legislative and the responsibilities that are outlined in the legislation to communities. What we also were able to do some consultations with women survivors, women and girl survivors in over 20 communities, where we unpack the family violence legislation, including the Domestic Violence Act, as well as FACA, and really help them to understand how the law affords to a response to persons who are experiencing the violence across the spectrum, whether it's emotional or psychological, financial, or physical violence, and what protection mechanisms are available to them. So, you know, it's helping people to understand that even if it's not physical, meaning that you can see the evidence on the person, even with children, that it should not be neglected. And I think that's the key thing, that oftentimes that form of violence is neglected because it's so difficult to represent that to the duty bearers, to the persons responsible for responding.
And Denby, just to go back just a little bit, could you also talk a little bit about NOPCAN's work over the years and sort of the feedback that you've gotten from teachers in what they're experiencing and how their reaction is to these issues, and also what the actual training that they receive in order to address the issue, which seems to be quite widespread.
Obviously, in this particular field, the challenges are many. They are great. The problem of child abuse in Belize down through the years has been pervasive. And so the response, particularly coming from teachers, is set within the context of how do they go about, if you will, applying certain discipline in order to maintain class or manage their classrooms and manage the children's behavior. And what has happened is that they encounter behaviors for which they are not familiar. They have not been able to, if you will, respond adequately. And the challenge has been that when you look back, traditionally the main method that was employed for the management of children within the classroom was corporal punishment. I think that is perhaps the most insidious and pervasive form of abuse. And so we worked tirelessly about a decade ago in order to change the legislation, to get prohibition. And I think when that occurred, there was a big cry, there was a national challenge coming from various sections of the population, including certain sections of teachers, whereby they objected because they were saying or arguing that what is the alternative? What are they going to use instead of what they have been accustomed to traditionally? Well, obviously, first and foremost, we had to, if you will, try to dispel those myths, try to dig deep enough that they can understand the history of abuse and where this assault on children, this hitting and this mentality that it is okay to hit children, and the justification that they had and they made, which of course, as you may be aware, continues up to this day. So the challenge continues. And that's the reason why I started off by saying that it has to do with changing mind, changing mentality, because it has been entrenched within our psyche that it is okay to hit, that in order for us to effect change, we must utilize some form of force, assault. And so that when children come sometimes with bruises in the classroom, it is, as Ms. Marlene was saying, they can see. That is something they can relate to very easily. However, it goes well beyond that, because if you are abused or assaulted physically, you are also traumatized emotionally and psychologically. And so we had to try and work through, we had to try and clear all that clutter, and also, if you will, engage teachers in a way whereby, quote unquote, the alternatives, which actually aren't alternatives, those methods that they have to employ in their classrooms are actual things that they were supposed to be using right from the get-go. So the whole concept of let's do this instead of that, that was not entertained. We do not entertain that up to this day. But the challenge has been great in terms of the response and how it is we are going to move forward. Now, we are just providing basic training, which means that they get basic knowledge about the indicators, the detection, how to detect child abuse and so on. But like I'm saying, it's very complex. Child abuse is a complex subject. Yeah. And therefore, teachers need continuous education, not only teachers, but all the people, professionals especially, who right across the board will work with children and who have to comply with the new legislations as such, no, and the protocols. And therefore, that's the reason why our effort has been so electrifying, because it is a subject which, even though you might be so well, you might go to whatever lengths to prepare, but the issue itself is very passionate. It draws the passion, deep passion from people. When you listen to them, when they react, when they tell you stories about what had happened to them when they were small, as they were growing up. Just recently, I heard the Compol, the Commissioner of Police, and I have to respond, okay, and use this platform to respond, because the level of leadership and people and managers, those people especially need to be targeted and needs to be trained. They need to understand what child abuse is all about. Yes. They need to understand who is a child, what is a child, and so on. And what has happened is that we have held on to these false notions and these false premises in terms of how we view children, or understanding of what a child is and so on, and what constitutes abuse. And unless we clear that clutter, whether it be within the classroom in terms of how the teacher sees a child and reacts to a child, and how the highest level of management of people who lead in the country, including the Prime Minister, including the cabinet, all those people need to get, if you will, a sensitization in regards to what constitutes child abuse and how to respond to child abuse. Because we have
understanding what it is and what the impact is. That should be the mandatory training that comes up next with frontliners. And I did say mandatory because I think, especially when you are in care of children, or when you are creating policy for children, you should have a good understanding and how things have changed and what the science and research says. But going back to the teacher training itself, just as we close, Consuelo, you said that one of the things you are exploring is to be able to offer this training beyond what has taken place so far, maybe a recorded version or something along those lines, because I could imagine other teachers being interested after hearing your explanation this morning.
Yes, Malene, that's our hope that, Marlene, sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, that's the goal. We want to continue this training in a sustainable way, because it's thousands of teachers that we would like to impact, because for every teacher we impact, we would say it's like 22 students would be impacted as a result of that. And those are different homes that will also be impacted. And so it's widespread. It's widespread in its impact, but it's also widespread in the way that the teacher is processing the training. And we have found that teachers have been very grateful. They've said to us that they are so grateful that they've gotten the training because they fully understand now what they need to do. I would want to say to Marlene that at some point we would like to offer this not just only to teachers, but we also want to offer this type of training and sensitization to all mandated reporters, whether it's community personnel, frontline workers. It's very important, and it's from their vision, from their vantage point, of course, customize the training for how they will proceed with responding to their beneficiaries, to the students and to children and adults that they will come across in their line of work. So while we are working on a sustainable program for teachers and schools to access this via the Teacher Learning Institute from the Ministry of Education, and myself and Ms. Barnes and Mr. York will be working together to see how best we can do this for 2022. We certainly know that the impact doesn't just stop at the training. It's also resensitization, and it's also monitoring of what teachers do at the school level. And a part of the data we've collected in this training kind of helped us to understand how many teachers actually do report cases of child abuse, how many of them themselves were survivors of abuse. So we've been collecting data at the same time we've been offering the training. And so we do have some data that we could, that we're working with through UNICEF and NOPCAN to see how best we can work with those schools and teachers to improve what they do with students. Because at the end of the day, we are all in this together. It is not just Pathlight, it's not just UNICEF, it's not just NOPCAN. Every person needs to take ownership of when they see something that is wrong, or when they see something that is against what we call violence against women and children, and men too. We want to do something about it. We know what to do, and that we're compelled to do something about it, because it's only through action we'll make a difference.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time, so we want to thank you, of course, for shedding some spotlight on this very important initiative. And you know, I definitely want to echo what you said just now, Consuelo. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you too, guys. And thank you to Ms. Maleni and Mr. Denby for joining us this morning.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take our final break, and we'll be back in a few. Thank you.
At Belize Diagnostic Center, we offer FDA-approved PCR testing for COVID-19. Get your results as quickly as 1 hour. Don't risk getting exposed to COVID-19 by going elsewhere. We take appointments, or we can come to your home or office using our concierge service with no additional fees. We have 10 locations countrywide. Call or WhatsApp us at 613-TEST. That is 613-8378 to schedule your test today.
Es un hecho. Únicamente con Smart obtienes todo realmente ilimitado. Solo con Smart obtienes datos ilimitados en cualquier momento. Mientras que con el otro proveedor solo son datos dobles los fines de semana. Con datos ilimitados todos los días, no hay necesidad de esperar, así que es un hecho que nuestros planes ilimitados superan a la competencia. Por lo tanto, no permita que le digan cómo y cuándo usar sus datos. Y obtenga llamadas, mensajes de texto y datos ilimitados. Vive la verdadera experiencia de planes ilimitados con Smart. Es un hecho. Haga el cambio y viva Smart.
The TV you love is always with you, from live TV, sports, and on-demand titles. Choose your plan today. Plans start as low as $15 per month. My TV, entertainment, anytime, anywhere.
Imagine going through your entire day without the burden and risk of carrying cash on you. Belize's shift to digital wallets has begun with eCash. We can now skip the cash when collecting money or paying for our essentials, all while using a fast, easy, and secure platform. Simply add funds to your wallet via bank transfer or at an agent, and you're good to go. You will be able to make quick, easy payments simply by scanning QR codes. And best of all, it all happens just like that. Payments are as easy as clicking a link online or scanning a QR code. Download the eCash app from the Google Play and Apple App Store today and take your first step into a cashless lifestyle. The future is here with eCash. For more information, visit www.e-cash.com or contact us via WhatsApp at 613-0257 to find out more.
And we're just getting our show wrapped up.
That's right, out of time.
Yes, so we want to say thank you to all our guests. We had some great conversations this morning, you know, so it's talking about issues from healthcare, climate change, to, you know, shedding a light on child abuse and, and how to deal with it. So
and the efforts that are being made, really great effort there in training teachers on how to identify signs of child abuse in the students. We appreciate you tuning in this morning. We know we have gone over schedule, so with that, though, we'll close off the show. If you want to contact us, send us an email at oye@channel5belize.com.
you can also find us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ and on Instagram at OIE Belize.
And remember to tune in tomorrow morning at 30 when you open your eyes.
Start your morning right.
Until then, keep your eyes, your mind,
and your heart open.
We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, Belize.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.